From viewers worldwide, this is FSN.
Yeah, thanks very much, Nina Maria. Welcome to Thursday's Richie Allen Radio Show. How you doing? It's approaching 3 minutes past 5, of course. It's a nice day here in Salford. Not as warm, but it's nice. I'm delighted to be with you. Kevin Myers returns to the programme today. And Gerald Celente, the Trends researcher, the great publisher of the Trends Journal himself, will be live from New York. I'm looking forward to this programme. Thank you so much for your company today.
It's the BBG, not the BBC. You're listening to the Richie Allen Radio Show, live from Salford in Greater Manchester.
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
And you know by now how to reach the programme. It's as simple as that. You drop me a tweet and that's how you speak to me. So do that this afternoon. Yeah, Gerald and Kevin, it's going to be a very interesting programme. Before that though, yes, let's 86. Yes, the theme tune. Yeah. Before that though, there's a few things to get through. A few things to talk about. So, the story getting most coverage in UK media today is not the protests surrounding the murder of George Floyd, no, nor is coronavirus getting the most coverage. It's Madeleine Mccann, believe it or not. Let me read you something briefly from BBC Online this afternoon. Madeleine Mccann is assumed to be dead, say German prosecutors who are investigating the disappearance of the British girl in 2007. 43-year-old German man is being investigated on suspicion of murder, according to the public prosecutor. The suspect, who has been named in German media as Christian B., is already serving a prison sentence. He is believed to have been in the area where Madeleine, aged 3 at the time, was last seen while on holiday in Portugal. Police are appealing for the public's help in solving the case after they initially announced they had a new suspect on Wednesday. Hans Christian Walters from the Braunschweig Public Prosecutor's Office said in an update today, "We are assuming that the girl is dead." So what does any of this mean? Well, I don't know. Don't look at me. But somebody wants us to believe this is significant. I'm not saying it isn't, because I don't know anything about it. But judging by UK media reporting today, it is very important for someone that we believe that this lead is very significant. Early this afternoon, around 2:30 or so, Sky News interviewed Peter Blexley. He's a former detective with Scotland Yard. Here's presenter Colin Brazier leading into his interview with Peter Blexley. Listen carefully. Okay? Listen very carefully. Let's cue that again. It's been a week of this.
Well, let's return to our top story now, which what's been described as a highly significant development in the disappearance of Madeleine Mccann, a 43-year-old German convicted sex offender who is currently in prison, has been identified by British and German police as a prime suspect. Well, we're joined now by a founding member of Scotland Yard's undercover unit and former detective, Peter Blexley. Peter, welcome to you. This feels significant.
This feels significant, says the presenter. What does the Scotland Yard guy say?
Well, it may be, although I would be somewhat cautious about the evidence as I've seen it so far, because it would appear to be all circumstantial. I haven't seen anything that I would regard as direct evidence that might be so compelling that it would lead to a charge. And let's remember, there is an evidential threshold that needs to be met before any charges could be put forward. And clearly, in this case, that has not happened so far.
Wow, well, that's very disappointing. For those who want us to believe that this is significant, it's not really significant, says Scotland Yard's Peter Blexley. It's circumstantial evidence, and the evidentiary threshold is quite high, and it's unlikely that it will be met. Somebody didn't like that, because an hour later, when covering it again, rather than play the interview with Blexley, which Sky News does all the time, well, they just got somebody else, somebody who would provide a different answer when asked how significant is the news out of Deutschland. So this time they got Jackie Hames. She's a former police officer and a former presenter of Crime Watch. Feast your ears.
Well, let's return to the latest on the Madeleine Mccann investigation. A 43-year-old German convicted sex offender currently in prison has been identified by British and German police as a prime suspect.
Now, at this stage, Brazier would say, an hour ago, I spoke with former Scotland Yard top guy Peter Blexley. But no, we're just going to pretend that we didn't speak to Peter Blexley. Who have we got now?
We're joined by the former Metropolitan Police officer and former Crime Watch presenter, Jackie Hames. Jackie, welcome.
I love the media.
Welcome to you. Thanks for joining us.
I love it.
Today. There have been false trails before, haven't there? Quite a few. This has the feel of something different.
I bet you a gazillion, squillion, trillion, montu fucking million pounds that Jackie says this is significant.
It certainly does, Colin, yes. Yes, I can't quite believe, so this time 13 years ago, I was spending so much time in your studio talking about this case, and there was, in those subsequent years, there have been so many theories and false trails and hopes raised and fallen again, but this does feel different. It feels very significant. There are so many links to the area, to his background, and putting him in, this guy, Christian V, in the profile of what could have happened, what could have happened to Madeleine, that it does feel very significant.
The levels they will go to manipulate your opinion, the depths they will plumb. Now, some of you will remember a significant moment on this radio show about 3 years ago. Sky News did the very same thing when they asked a doctor to come on and explain why we should all have the flu jab. And they brought a young woman on who said, well, not really. It's on YouTube, this. She said, well, maybe some very vulnerable people, maybe, but, So next hour, they got another doctor on who said, you better get the flu jab, every one of you. This is what Sky News and the BBC does. Somebody wants you to believe that it's very significant. This 43-year-old guy has been mentioned by the Germans. The Germans. What's going on? I haven't a Scooby-Doo. I have no idea what happened to Madeleine McCann. Yes, you can speculate. Yes, I don't particularly like Jerry McCann, but it's a personal thing. He creeps me out, to be honest, but there's no evidence that Jerry McCann had anything to do with the disappearance of his daughter, at least not that I've seen. I know there are content creators in the cybersphere who believe differently, and good luck to them, but I haven't a Scooby-Doo. New charges have been announced against all of the sacked police officers who were there when George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, when Derek Chauvin was kneeling on his neck. And the charge against Derek Chauvin has been elevated from third-degree murder to second-degree murder. This is very significant, right? The death of George Floyd has sparked protests across the US, and they have spread to the UK and elsewhere. The vast majority of demonstrations over the last 8 days have been peaceful, but we have seen violence in a number of cities, and we've spoken at length on this programme about that. So today, a number of well-known black entertainers and athletes have appeared on UK media. On Sky News Breakfast this morning, which is hosted by the venerable, the one and only Kay Burley, we heard from the pop star Jamelia of Superstar fame, and I didn't have to look that up, dear listener. I remember Superstar by Jamelia because I used to play it when I was a nightclub DJ, and several remixes of it. So I was delighted that I knew something relatively modern. So Jamelia was emotional. She said the UK was systemically and institutionally racist, and that white people were going to have to step up. So Burley asks Jamelia, what do black people need to affect change? You'll hear a very brief question from Kay, and then Jamelia's answer.
What tools do you need to try to change that?
It's knowledge. It's actually making an effort to learn, to understand, and also to not put the onus on black people. I feel like, systemic racism is the normalization and the legitimization of racism, and it routinely benefits white people and chronically disadvantages black people. So when we understand that, it's very clear on who needs to do the work. And in this conversation, I implore white people to do the work, please.
White people need to do the work. Systemic racism negatively impacts black people and benefits white people, and white people have to do the work. Now, Kay should jump in. I don't care how nice Jamelia is, and I don't care that Jamelia is not a politician. And I respect her because she probably means what it is she's saying. But it's your job as a presenter to say, look, hang on a second there. There are millions of people living in poverty in this country as a result of the austerity imposed on them by David Cameron's government and Nick Clegg's government. And it's gone on for 10 years, and they're not specifically of any ethnicity. What are you talking about? You know, just ask her a few questions, but Kay won't do it.
Work, please do the work, because you are essential to dismantling systemic racism. I think.
But what if I don't believe that systemic racism actually exists in 2020? What if I was to believe that, yes, of course we do have racists, of course we do, but that it certainly isn't systemic and it's not institutional? What if I was to believe that and I was to offer you some evidence? Kay just won't do it.
A lot of people feel like, oh, George Floyd is the tipping point. It may be the tipping point for you. It may be the tipping point for white people. Maybe because we're on lockdown and you've had access and you cannot get away from the fact that this man had a knee on his neck and was murdered in broad daylight on camera.
Yeah, in America, in Minneapolis. Disgusting thing. And as the rapper Zuby told Sky News yesterday, even though black people are disproportionately more likely to be in a violent altercation with a police officer in the United States, incidences of white people being attacked by the police are greater in number. It's not exclusive to black people. And it happened in America, Jamelia. Right.
Camera, but people are being murdered and disadvantaged, have metaphorical knees on their necks every single day, from the education system, the healthcare system, housing, wealth, jobs, criminal justice, the adultification of our children. They are all knees on our necks, and we pay with our lives. And I think it's important for you. And
we pay with our lives. Again, Kay should interject and say, who are you talking about, Jamelia? Who are these people that pay with their lives? It's not, rude or insensitive. And, some presenters will say, you've got a lady on there, she's a citizen, an entertainer, she's not a politician, so maybe give her a little bit of an easy ride. But no, you've got to say, who are the we you refer to paying with their lives? I'd like to know that. Not because I'm a bastard that wants to embarrass you. I'm really interested, and if you prove me wrong, well, I'll be, hey, okay, fair enough, This gets worse, though.
You and anyone listening to this to understand what that means, understand what systemic racism actually is. Once you understand, you cannot possibly continue on. You cannot possibly continue to blindly benefit from systemic racism. You cannot. It's like you can't accept that privilege. You can't accept that privilege whilst acknowledging what's happening to black people. If you're not racist, if you're racist, then I guess you can.
Thoughts on President Trump?
I mean, Burley is wretched. Kay Burley is the worst presenter in the history of the UK media. I've said this before. Wretched. Jamelia basically said, you have to understand that systemic racism is here. If you don't understand it, you're part of the problem. How can you benefit blindly? How can you have your privilege at the expense of black people? Maybe you can do it if you're racist. This is dreadful claptrap. It's just unmitigated nonsense. And rather than take it on, Burley, who's answerable to our producer, says, what do you think of Trump? To answer the question, Jamelia said that she wouldn't speak about Trump. She wouldn't deign or stoop to discuss him, and it moved on. Dreadful stuff. We'll come back to it in a few minutes with Kevin Myers. How can you sidestep any examination of what she said there? She might be heartfelt, she might be sincere, but there's a lot of holes you can poke in the theory, right? Right. It's also terribly sad and kind of ridiculous. I mentioned this yesterday, while real programs of death and destruction are more visible now than ever before, we're dealing with this nonsense. Really. I mentioned Stand Up to Racism yesterday. They wanted people in the UK to go to their front doors, hold signs up denouncing racism, and to take a knee. Did you see anybody do that? I was on air at 6 p.m. yesterday, as I will be today, so I don't know if any of my neighbours proceeded to walk to their front doors, take a knee, and foolishly hold up placards denouncing racism. Julia Hartley-Brewer is a talk radio host with the station Talk Radio, aptly named. And she spoke with Stand Up to Racism Sabi Dalu, and she wanted to know, did Julia, where were the protesters when police in France and in Hong Kong and in China and elsewhere were beating people up? Where were you, says Julia Hartley-Brewer.
Can you remind me when the major protests were against French police brutality, Hong Kong police brutality and the Chinese police brutality? Can you tell me when those protests took place? Because I don't remember seeing video footage of that. But there will be a protest. But people feel so strongly about one man being murdered by the police. Again, a horrific crime. There are horrific crimes and racist crimes all the time, but we don't see protests.
Well, I think if people want to protest about those other issues, they're entitled to do so.
Well,
I think we have to engage with the question that you first asked, which is, why are people demonstrating about this? And my point was, yes, white people are also angry and suffering with economic hardship and angry about COVID-19. And a lot of young white people were also on the demonstration yesterday. That was the only point I was making earlier. And I think that the point about social distancing that you made, I mean, yes, it is an issue. Why do people in the middle of a pandemic decide to actually go on a demonstration? And I think if we're worried about social distancing rules, then I think we have to first ask...
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with social distancing. The question Hartley-Brewer asked you is, why are you not out protesting when people are getting their brains bashed in France? The Gilets jaunes. And the answer, of course, is pretty straightforward. It's identity politics. My group is more precious, is more vulnerable, is more oppressed than yours, so I'll come out to protest when one of my herd, when one of my herd is murdered or killed or beaten up or robbed or whatever. That's the answer. Wee Jimmy Cranky gives a COVID briefing every day. Scottish First Minister, one of the most ridiculous people on these islands, massive cheerleader for the lockdown. This is Nicola Sturgeon. Today she couldn't avoid acknowledging yet more news of devastating job losses, this time in Inchinan. Cue Nicola Sturgeon.
I want to acknowledge the job losses that were announced yesterday at Rolls-Royce in Inchinan. That announcement will have been devastating news for the workforce and their families at what is already a very anxious time, and unfortunately it may not be the last of its kind in the period ahead. I want to stress that the Scottish Government will do everything we can to secure as good an outcome as we can for those whose jobs are at risk. And yesterday's news emphasises a point I have made before, that alongside a public health emergency, we are also now dealing with an economic emergency on a scale that none of us have experienced before. And that requires, and it will get, the attention and focus of the Scottish Government, just as the health emergency has and continues to get.
I mean, the business owners must want to throttle her, and nobody should throttle anybody. What a puppet, what a stooge, what a prop of the hidden hand. Imagine talking about devastating job losses. The lockdown! The totally unnecessary grinding to a halt of the economy has caused and will cause misery on a scale that's unimaginable. Jesus wept. And the Global Vaccine Summit is being hosted by Boris Johnson. Online, presumably. Of course. 50 countries and organisations coming together to secure funding for Bill Gates' Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. You couldn't make it up. They want to raise about $7.5 billion, which is about 6 billion quid, because they want to immunise 300 million more children in the world's poorest countries within the next 5 years. Of course they do. No coverage of it in the media whatsoever, of course. Oh, Jesus. Gavi, eh? Gavi, a eugenicist organisation. Nothing more, nothing less. Let's immunise 300 million people. Bill, you won't be immunising anybody. We know what happened in India, pal. It's hard. It's hard to keep an even keel, to keep on an even keel, isn't it? It's hard to maintain your humour and your sanity and your poise with all of this going on. But we'll do our best. Here's music from Chuck Berry. When we come back, Kevin Myers on the Richie Allen Radio Show talking about what's been going on in Minneapolis, in Los Angeles, in New York City, and of course the protests spread to the UK and to Ireland as well. Chuck Berry! Right, Chuck Berry on the Richie Allen Radio Show, live from Salford, Europe's most listened to independent radio show. And it really is. Welcome to it. The programme is archived on Spotify, iTunes and Podomatic. My guest, before we welcome my guest to the programme, the BBC is reporting in the last few minutes, staggeringly, that from June 15th, which is what, 11 days away, wearing face coverings on public transport will be compulsory in England. Now, this is obviously coming out of the government's COVID briefing this afternoon. It's a developing story, but the headline is, from June 15th, if you want to take a bus, a tram, a train, maybe even a taxi, you'll have to wear a face mask here in the UK. I bet my guest this hour will have something to say about that. He is a very, very distinguished journalist and author, writing for national newspapers in the UK and Ireland for many years. His books are terrific as well. Yeah, I don't need to say too much more about him. Let's welcome back to the programme our friend these days, Mr. Kevin Myers. Kevin, welcome back to the programme. Give us your initial thoughts on the news that in the UK, face masks will be compulsory in less than 2 weeks' time. What do you think?
I am dumbfounded that if it's considered necessary now that it was not considered necessary 2 months ago. There's nothing I can say. It's quite clear that the government in London is floundering. You have a Prime Minister who's incapable and whose arrogance and ambition have brought him far beyond his natural station in life. It is a tragedy because of the high death toll that is resulting in Britain. As far as I understand, it's 50,000 in Britain, whereas it's 100,000 in the United States of America, and the United States of America has a population, 4 times that or 5 times that of, it's more closer to 5 times that of the United Kingdom, and they've only got twice the death toll. So what's resulted is the worst of all possible worlds. If the face mask works, and the opinions are divided on that, then the face mask should have been introduced at the very outset. But I have to confess, the news has taken me by surprise, because I would have bet my house, or what remains of it, on this not being the case. So there we are. What do I know?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Again, we touched on this last week. Again, very, very senior scientists who are precluded from speaking on British television continue to say that the peak of this happened a long time ago, and it's more harmful now to keep people in their houses and to be asking people to wear masks. It's more harmful now than ever, and yet these voices are not heard. Welcome back to the programme.
Actually, you know, what you've just touched on there is relevant to events in America about which I'm going to be talking. One of the primary vectors in the tragedy that has convulsed America is the fact that so many people were locked up in unnatural circumstances. And you can't lock up young males in particular, because we men are highly unstable, unpredictable, and dangerous group of people. It's this sort of the toxins that accumulate in the male body are not like those that accumulate in the female body. And if you lock up men for a long time, you will get explosions. But anyway, that's just, I don't want to detract you from the question you were about to ask me.
The protests have spread here. I know you will have seen the video of George Floyd, and we've seen these things before. We've seen confrontations between black men and police officers in the United States. that have ended badly. We've seen protests. These are different in terms of the scale of them in the United States, but also the fact that they've spread to these islands. I've noted with some amusement, and I don't find anything funny about this really, but I've noted with amusement that Irish protesters are confronting Gardaí with the slogan "Hands up, don't shoot," a police force that isn't armed or wasn't the last time I was living in Ireland anyway. Quite strange. So what's happening, Kevin? What's happening?
It's pathetic. This imitative behavior that follows an American trend in circumstances which simply don't apply. It's like using American terminology, like left field, the baseball term, and it's used by people over here as if it has some relevance, and it doesn't. We don't have an armed police force in Ireland, nor do you have in Manchester or Salford.
Yeah.
As it happens, George Floyd was not a victim of white racism. He was a victim of police brutality. We've all seen the video. It is shocking. But the man who was doing the killing is Chauvin, as you know, if that's the correct pronunciation. The man who was minding him is of apparently Cambodian or Lao origin, and at least one of the other policemen, that's not so easy to ascertain, might be Asian, and the fourth police officer is probably mixed race black. So this is a case of murderous police brutality. And there isn't any other term but murderous, because it lasted 9 minutes. And the Chauvin has been charged with second-degree murder. He is married to an Asian woman who is now filed for divorce. So the important thing here is to deduct the racial component from this killing. These are brutes and thugs, quite clearly. They deserve to go to jail, quite clearly. But blaming white people for something that is not white, that is just random bad behavior by bad police officers, in a city that has been governed by the Democratic Party for 50 or 60 years, in a state which has only once voted for a Republican president in 1972, is to forget the reality that it is not the work of President Trump that caused this disaster. And Trump, of whatever his many vices, and there are many of them, cannot be held accountable for events in Minneapolis.
Let me interject, Kevin.
Sorry.
Let me interject, because this is really important. And huge interest. I mentioned this. I sent you an email. You mightn't have got a huge interest in this. I kind of share your thoughts about the officers involved. I like you, I couldn't say it's racism. But here's an irrefutable fact. If you let me say this, and then you can come back in. An irrefutable fact is black people are far more likely to be involved in a violent confrontation with a police officer right across the United States. They're far more likely to find themselves in jail, and they are more brutally sentenced in courts of law in the United States. Now, before you jump back in and jump back down my throat, when black people listen to programs like this, they say, Richie, you're a middle-aged Irish guy, white Irish guy. Your friend Kevin is a middle-aged white Irish guy. Well, Kevin's dad is Irish. Kevin is Irish. What the hell do you guys know of what it's like to be a black guy dealing with the police, whether it's in America or in England? You might have an opinion, but you know nothing about it. That's what they say time and again.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
It's true. I have no knowledge of what it's like to be a Vietnamese or Russian or Congolese or South African. Well, the only position I have in personal experience is my own. But there are statistics for this. And the statistics are deplorable. It is true that a disproportionate number of black men in America are in jail. Let's deal with America, not make things more confused by bringing in Britain or France or Germany. Over 50% of murders in America, or homicides, are committed by members of the black community. Since black women are responsible for virtually no murders, you can say approximately, since about 13-14% of the American population is black, you can say 7% of the 7% of the population responsible for 54% of homicides. Now, as for police shooting, this has been examined by a university in America. They have found that Asian, Hispanic, and black police officers are more likely to open fire on a black suspect than are white officers. I'm not making this up. This is a fact that's resulting from academic research. Now, if you look at the figures, as I have been doing in preparation for this program, on average in the United States of America, 1,000 men and women are shot dead by the police every year. The majority of the people who are shot dead are invariably white men. Now, disproportionately, it is true that the smaller number of black men, and the figure is before me somewhere, I'll try to find it in a second. Say it's 350 of those who can identify. You can identify the race. 350 of the dead are white men, and about 200 are black men. But the problem is that there is a greater incidence of violence amongst the black community. 93% of black men who are murdered are murdered by fellow black men. So we have a complex social problem which is not going to be addressed or solved in any way by simplistic declarations of white brutality, white supremacy, white, etc. It's not just a question of white guilt. It's a very complex matter dealing with the breakdown or resulting from the breakdown in family life in the United States of America. In 1960, 2/3 of all black children were living with both parents. By 1995, only 1/3 of black children were living with their parents, and that, generally speaking, was with their mother. And by the early years of this century, it was down to something like 20%.
And that's worthy of discussion, that, Kevin. That's worthy of discussion, that on its own. But I want to put something to you. As somebody who spent many years campaigning against capital punishment and getting to know a lot of people in the United States of America, and I got to know a lot of politicians as well, I used to say to white politicians in the US, being the devil's advocate, when I was doing radio back in the day, I would say exactly what you have said. I would say, well, half the murders are committed by black men. And white politicians, some of them on the right, would say to me, and it blew my mind, Kevin, they would say, Richie, many of these guys who are convicted had the most wretched of representation when they got to court. They had to go with the public defender because they had no money. And they said, Richie, if you reopened every conviction, not just for black men, but if you reopen every murder conviction in the United States, such is the dreadful state of the legal system in America, you'll find that there are real serious grounds in many cases for the conviction to be quashed because representation was absolutely dreadful. And I think there's a lot to that, especially for black men who are sentenced for crimes, whether it be burglary or murder. They often end up with an absolutely ridiculously poor barrister, brief, lawyer, whatever you want to call them. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that's a part of the problem. I did say it when I was talking, that it's enormously complicated. Having an unjust and inept legal system is one factor to be taken into account, which therefore absolves the police of the blanket accusation that they alone are to blame and they are responsible for as I heard it on television American programs in the last 24 hours, of the genocide of black people. There is no genocide in the United States of America. Fox News did an analysis of 1,000 police killings last year, and they were able to identify 10 occasions when unarmed black people were killed by the police. They examined all 10 closely. And I can't go through all the figures now, but in 2 of the occasions when unarmed black people were shot by the police officers have been charged with manslaughter or murder. On the other 8 occasions, one was the unarmed black man actually was tasering a police officer, and unless the police officer shot the black man who was tasering, he could have lost his weapon. 2 of the other killings involved automobiles where black drivers drove into police officers and police officers defended themselves. But overall, the circumstances in which 250 of the 1,000 of the total of 1,000 killings by the police. 250 were of black men, 350 were of white men, and of the 250, all the 240 were of armed men.
Men who were
now,
armed. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's the end of the question. I confess completely it's a very complex situation.
Yeah. And
that's why crowds saying, talking about Black Lives Matter, tell you nothing. Much more than, as important as Black Lives Matter is that truth matters. And we can never identify the problems, our many problems in society, unless we start telling one another truths and not exchange simple labels and simple catch cries, which simply confuse the argument, because catch cry has an endurance far greater than the truth.
Unfortunately, this is the state of the media, not only in the US, but in this country. I had a teacher some years ago, a lecturer, a black gentleman, and I asked him about racism. And he was of the opinion that the UK is a great place to be, that, great strides were made, and he didn't particularly feel that he was subject to racism, and, he was kind of reticent to play the race card. But he said something very interesting. He said, Richie, and here's a philosophical question for you, Kevin. Kevin Myers is our guest. Great to have Kevin back on so soon after last week. He said, Richie, if you go back to the 50s and 60s, conditions for black people in parts of America were dreadful. They led to the riots and the great marches, of course, of the 1960s. He said, Richie, you have to consider the possibility that because it's such a recent time ago, the 50s and 60s is so recent, many people are still alive. How can we be absolutely sure, he said, this black gentleman, that these attitudes, these prejudices have gone completely institutionally? How could we be absolutely sure of that, because it's such a recent historical thing, right?
Assuming that prejudice is the cause of the events in America. Now, I'm not saying that it's not.
Yeah.
I don't live in America. I have been in America, and I've spent some of the most enjoyable times of my life in America, and I'm very fond of the United States of America. But I don't live there, and I don't talk to Americans day by day, so I'm not going to presume that prejudice is the cause of this, and nor should you, with due respect. It's a very complex situation, but it has to be said that in the 1950s, the emerging black middle class was doing very well, despite the absence of civil rights, despite the existence of the Jim Crow laws, despite the existence of widespread bigotry that was overt and explicit in the way that it's not now. Yet nonetheless, the black populations were producing a middle class of great fluency and articulacy, and that people in that middle class produced Colin Powell, that great soldier of the Republic of the United States of America, and black entrepreneurs were emerging. So it wasn't just a question of oppressed black people who were not getting anywhere. Dunbar High School in New York was all black and produced the highest level of mathematical qualifications of any school in New York, and that includes Brooklyn Heights, which had a very large number of Jewish students. But its students did not match the quality of the African-American students in Dunbar High. So the simplistic picture of black oppression and white oppression, black oppressed people suffering under white oppression, is inaccurate. And it does a grave disservice to the enormous achievements of black people before civil rights came along. They were determined to make the best of their lives, and they did, and they produced great, great people. It's an obvious thing like Sidney Poitier. Sidney Poitier was first kissed or first touched by a white woman on television, by Petula Clark.
That's right.
In 1963 on television. I think it was Sidney Poitier. And that caused a sensation in America because white women didn't touch black men on television. And Petula Clark made sure that alternative tapes were destroyed so that ABC television, I think it was, had to show her touching a black man. That's how bad things were in those days.
Yeah.
Yet nonetheless, the rising middle class produced some great talent. And I have just forgotten the Secretary of State under George Bush, who
Condoleezza Rice. Yeah. Can I just say this? Can I just say this, Kevin?
At a concert level.
Can I just
she
say
spoke
this?
Russian and German and French fluently.
She did, but let me jump in. I believe history will remember Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice as accessory to mass murder. These are the people who lied about weapons of mass destruction that led to the killing of 1 million people in Iraq and the displacement of many more. If I didn't say that, I'd be killed by my audience. I'm not being petty. But I don't want to argue about Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell. I want to play you a bit of audio, my friend. By the way, folks, I can't recommend the books of Kevin Myers highly enough. I really can't. And I do hope, I pray to God that Kevin will get a website together soon and start writing again, a genius writer. Now, I want to play you a clip. You are a genius. I want to play you a clip. It was on Sky News this morning, in fact. It's the pop star Jamelia. She's a black lady, pretty articulate, smart lady, I think, and very successful pop star. And she talks here to Kay Burley about white privilege. It's only 50 seconds long, Kevin. Have a listen to it. And when we return, I want to get your thoughts on it, because she articulates, I think, what a lot of well-known black people have been saying for the last few days about why white people need to do more against racism. Have a listen, Kevin. Back with Kevin Myers after this.
People are being murdered and disadvantaged, have metaphorical knees on their necks every single day, from the education system, the healthcare system, housing, wealth, jobs, criminal justice, the adultification of our children. They are all knees on our necks, and we pay with our lives. And I think it's important for you and anyone listening to this to understand what that means, understand what systemic racism actually is. Once you understand, you cannot possibly continue on. You cannot possibly continue to blindly benefit from systemic racism. You cannot. It's like you can't accept that privilege. You can't accept that privilege whilst acknowledging what's happening to black people. If you're not racist, if you're racist, then I guess you can.
Right, Kevin, we can't blindly continue to benefit from our privilege. What do you think?
I have no privilege. I'm not privileged. Nor are you privileged because you're white. This is rubbish. This kind of bullshit being recited as if somehow or other you'll be meant to feel guilty because you're a white person. I remind you of the figures that I told you early on. 93% of all black men who are murdered in the United States are murdered by black men. They're not murdered by the police. The minority of people murdered by the police in any given year in America are black men. There are more white men killed by the police. I said murdered by the police. I should have said killed by the police. There are more white men. Generally speaking, the ratio is twice as many white men are killed by the police every year. So the picture that she describes of somehow white privilege causing the difference in positions is simply wrong. She's factually wrong. She talked in a bigoted way. Had I used language like that about black people, I would be rightly vilified.
Yeah.
You can't make generalizations about entire racial groups, one vilified and the other exalted. It's racist. And we have to confront racism in whatever form it comes. And that's simply racist there. I benefit from no black person's disadvantage, and nor do you. Nothing in my life it results from the black people who live with us in Ireland, and I imagine that's the truth for you in Manchester or Salford. We shouldn't accept untruth merely because it comes from a fashionable black woman in that case.
I agree with you. You earned your position through your writing brilliance. I often disagreed with things that you wrote, but was all the better for having been confronted by something that I hadn't considered. You earned that position because you were better than most people at writing and at analysing geopolitical events. I like to think that over the years, any position I held in radio was because of my own ability. I agree with everything you said there. I'm really worried that positive discrimination, which isn't a new thing, I think we're going to see more and more of it. And here's something, here's something, Kevin, I'm really worried about. There's a new trend now, and we see this on social media. They're telling people that not being a racist is not good enough. The singer Harry Styles, he's way before our time now, Kevin. Way after our time, Jesus. He's way after our time. Harry Styles, very popular. He's been saying not being a racist, not good enough. You've got to state that you're not a racist. You've got to get involved. And I really worry about that, Kevin. That's almost, I don't want to say it, that's secret police type stuff, that, isn't it?
It is secret police. Are black people are meant to make declarations that they're not racist?
Yeah.
Are Asians, are Chinese people, are people of Southeast Asia, Pakistan and Indian origin, are they meant to make declarations that they're not racist? Are these special qualifications to be attributed only to white people? Because this is called apartheid. We have been here before, where you identify somebody or other not by that individual's particular worth, but by the group to which they belong. This is specifically what Martin Luther King denounced.
Yeah.
He said, we don't judge somebody by the color of their skin, but their individual merits. And he was the one who said that he looked forward to the days when Negro children, as he called them, and white children, and Jews and Catholics and Protestants can live together and not be judged by the color of their skin. Here we have the very principles of Martin Luther King, who essentially gave his life for freedom. He gave his life for the equality between the races, being turned on its head so that it can justify a new racial norm to be imposed on apparently white people. What are they going to do next? Make us wear yellow stars? Yeah. Or how far do we have to go down this road of racial discrimination and racial segregation and racial assessment based entirely on the color of your skin? Nobody has said to me, nobody's given to me any proof that what happened in America was appalling, but it was one terrible killing of 1,000 killings that the police do every year. No one's told me that this is the product of white supremacism, when quite clearly the most evident policeman, apart from Chauvin, is a Laotian or called Tuo Thai. That's his name. He's either Laotian or Cambodian. So this is not a white offence, and it's probable that the two other police officers there are not white. So why should we talk about white guilt when only one man unquestionably involved in this atrocity is a white man? And why do you assume that the police officers in America are white? There was a killing in St. Louis, Missouri, the other night of a former police officer called Dawn, who was asked to and was minding a friend's
business,
pawn shop, and he was shot dead by looters. And he was had been a black police officer, and the chief of police in St. Louis, Missouri, gave a testament in his honor, and he too was a black man. And the police force is one of the institutions in America that first welcomed black people, and black men in particular, and black women, and there are black heads of police and black sheriffs all over the United States of America. You can't presume that because a policeman is a policeman or a policewoman that either is white. That's not the case anymore, and hasn't been the case for a long time.
Worrying thing for me as well is there's also a tendency. I interviewed a former police officer on Monday called Kevin Maxwell, very well known. He revealed he was in the Met Police for 10 years, Manchester, London. He experienced some terrible things as a gay black man. He did. It's on the record, and he wrote about it. And he believes that racism is institutional in the country. And of course, I argued with him, and I disagreed with him, and we had a good back and forth. But something that I don't like, and it's worrying, is this kind of tendency. We're being asked now to take people's truth on board. This is a new phrase that's coming in. You know, people are telling you their truth, and to deny it or to dismiss it is in and of itself kind of partly kind of racist. I don't like that. I want to ask you this, Kevin. We've covered on this program something which is really happening in China, and I know you've heard a little bit about this. You may not have. I think you have. It's a social crediting model which has been introduced in China. Yes. Horrendous. I've heard of it, yeah. And when people are saying, like yesterday afternoon, you know, people were saying, Stand Up to Racism said, you've got to go to your front door and take a knee to show that you're not racist and that you're in solidarity with black people. Now, I didn't do it because I was on air. I wouldn't have done it anyway. When people are saying you've got to clap for the NHS, all this craziness, Kevin, which we've discussed, I'm really concerned that there are people in this country who wouldn't mind a system like the social crediting system.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. It's not just Britain, it's everywhere. It's quite clear that an enormous transformation has occurred in popular mentality. I put it down to the death of religion and people looking for new norms and new certainties to which they can adhere. And the Chinese model of social control is just another dimension of what's happening in another part of China.
Yeah.
Well, the United States of America would be to be doing to its Muslim population what the Chinese are doing. 2 million Muslims in China are essentially living in either concentration camps or in open-air concentration camps. But all freedom has been denied them. We don't know how many of them have been executed or murdered. We have no way of knowing. Nothing that happens in the United States of America compares to what's happening in China. Yet the president of China was allowed to address the House of Commons, and President Trump was not. Now, it's worth remembering this is, the 75th anniversary of the ending of the Second World War. And what made Britain and what made Western Europe free, which, to be sure, Britain protected itself in 1940, but what made possible the landings in 1944 and the victory of democratic forces in 1945 was the United States of America. And what protected Western Europe in the years following that victory was the United States of America. It's Americans' treasure and American blood has made freedom in Western Europe possible. And it really is long overdue that we remember that and celebrate the great sacrifices of the American young people, that Western Europe be free. And I am so sick and tired of the abuse being thrown at the United States of America. I love America.
I know you love it.
Whenever I've gone to America, I've enjoyed the company of Americans, no matter what their race. And I do detest the notion that you specify white man, black man, white police officer, black police officer. There are Americans and there are Americans, just as there are English people and they're English people. And you really shouldn't be specifying them according to their skin color. But historically, I really do think it is time for us all to think very carefully about the debt we owe to the United States of America for defeating totalitarianism twice, helping to defeat the Nazis and then to defeat communism. And that's when I hear all the vile anti-American filth that fills the airways, the BBC in particular. Yeah. I think I am a permanent dissenter. I greatly respect America and American freedom.
You do, and you've articulated that really well. And look, I have no time for China. I have no time for Russia. I don't have any time for any government anywhere. I'm not an anarchist, but I don't have any time for any government anywhere. Look, I despise the US system of governance, and I despise what the US has done in the Middle East and in the world and in Central America. That's my opinion. But it's not because I'm on the side of the BBC or because I'm some crazy leftist. I'm delighted that you've articulated your feelings for the US. I don't share them, but I totally respect yours. What I'd like, before we go, Kevin, we talked in the past about the European Union, and we talked about Brexit, and we talked about the UK leaving. I know it's a bit of a left field question now, but just in the last couple of minutes, I want to ask.
You used that baseball term again.
I know I did. After you said not to use it, mea culpa. My apologies, Kevin. It's a question out of the blue, then, shall we say? Will Brexit ever happen? Because one of the things I've come to believe, and I am a bit of a conspiracy theorist, is that the COVID craziness might be used as the basis for an excuse to extend the departure from the European Union even further, and I'm really worried it won't happen. Have you any thoughts on that finally?
No, I do have thoughts, and I don't think your fears will be justified, but you're justified in having them.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
I don't trust the European Union. I despise it. I greatly regret that Ireland has to remain in the EU, and there's no possibility once Britain's gone or Ireland going the same way, because politically Ireland can't follow Britain for reasons we all understand. But I despise the undemocratic nature of the Union. I despise the notion that somehow that the nation state is in irrelevance. I don't believe in Ireland that people actually believe the nation state's irrelevance. It's something that is very dear to people's hearts. I'm glad that the English people in particular have stood up for their definition of the nation state. I think other ancient nation states like the Danes and the French the Danes and the French in particular will follow I say deliberately, the English example. I believe in the nation state, which is an open and welcoming state that welcomes immigrants and makes use and benefits from immigrants, just as immigrants can make use of their host societies and not lose any sense of who they are. My mother spent most of her life in England as an Irish woman, but she never ceased to be Irish, nor did she ever cease to be loyal to England. And that's the way immigration should work. And so, yes, you're right. I'm sceptical about whether the EU will allow Britain to leave. But in the longer term, the people who helped win the Second World War will prevail in this struggle too.
This is a cheap shot now as you're leaving. Not a really bad cheap shot. But my learning, my library visits and my historical learning tells me that it was Russia that did for the Nazis in the Second World War, not the United States. I give more credit to the Russians.
I said the United States made Western Europe free. Had the United States not arrived, Britain could not have advanced the cause of democracy up to the shores or to nearly to Berlin. The Russians would have, or the Soviet Union would have arrived in Calais. And then where would we have been? No, what the American contribution was to make democracy possible in Western Europe. Had the Soviet Union prevailed, as it would have done in another 2 years, then all of the European landmass from Calais to Vladivostok would have been communist. And there's a pretty picture to contemplate.
Thanks so much for your time today. I love having you on. And you know you're welcome back at any time. And of course you're in Kildare, not in Dundalk. I said Dundalk last. I have no idea why. You're a treasure, Kevin. Thanks for giving us your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Richie. Take care. Bye-bye.
Look after yourself. Bye-bye. It's the brilliant Kevin Myers, live on the line from Kildare. And I hope he'll come back more often. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. I hope that he gets online and starts writing again, because his is a very important voice, I believe. Thank you, Kevin. Right, it's exactly... I don't even think I've got a tune lined up. That's how bad I was absolutely gripped by Kevin. So I do have a tune. I do. I've got Johnny Cash. Hey! Would you believe it? The Man in Black. It's exactly 1 minute past 6. This is your Richie Allen Show.
Burns the rain.
Renowned healer Mark Byersky travels the world to find the most unique and powerful crystals for self-healing. Since the ancient times, crystals have been used as healing tools. They hold a natural healing vibration and are highly charged in positive energy. Mark teaches how to channel the universal energy and transfer it to the crystal to activate its healing power. Each crystal is used for its unique ability to target a different physical or emotional challenge. Mark Byersky is an author, healer, speaker, and founder of the Pure Energy Healing Academy. He shares powerful messages of inspiration and healing on his daily YouTube videos, reaching millions worldwide. Mark's crystals, healing oils, and incense sticks are most sought after by other healers. His collection is available online at www.markbyersky.com. His work is presented through Lemon House, a company that creates and curates consciously made gifts.
Now, you might not be aware of this, but it has been announced in the UK this afternoon that from June 15th, from the 15th of June, it will be compulsory to wear face masks on public transport in the UK. Would you believe it? Indeed. Headlines from FSN.
From FSN in Washington, I'm Nina Rare-Potts for the latest world headlines. One of two men accused of murdering unarmed African-American Ahmaud Arbery in the U.S. state of Georgia used a racial slur after shooting him, according to prosecutors. 10 days of protests are continuing across the U.S. following the killing of unarmed African-American George Floyd in the hands of Minneapolis police. And thousands have ignored a ban in Hong Kong to hold a mass vigil in memory of the victims of the Tiananmen Square crackdown in Beijing.
Thank you very much, Nina Maria Potts there. It is 5 minutes past 6. It is the Richie Allen Radio Show, the BBG, not the BBC. And we can hear from, I tell you what, multitasking. Jean Ann Crowley knows what's going on. The multitasking, there is no producer, there is no editor, there is no assistant, there is just the big baldy gammon. We can hear from the Transport Secretary of the UK, none other than Grant Shapps, explaining during the government's COVID briefing that face coverings will be mandatory. Listen to this. Listen.
I can announce that as of Monday the 15th of June, face coverings will become mandatory on public transport. That doesn't mean surgical masks, which we must keep for clinical settings. It means the kind of face covering you can easily make at home. There'll be exemptions to these rules for very young children, for disabled people, and those with breathing difficulties. But broadly, as we come through this phase, we're doing what many other countries have asked transport users to do. And as passenger numbers increase, and we expect this trend to continue, we need to ensure every precaution is taken on buses, trains, aircraft, and on ferries. With more people using transport, the evidence suggests that wearing face coverings offers some, albeit limited, protection against the spread of the virus. A face covering helps protect our fellow passengers. It's something that we can each do to help each other. And whilst it also remains true that measures like maintaining social distancing, washing your hands remain the most critical things to do, we also know on public transport, keeping 2 metres apart is not always possible at all times. Indeed, the guidance explicitly recognises this fact. So when more people return to the network from the 15th of June onwards, they will be required to wear face coverings on transport network. We'll make these rule changes under the National Rail Conditions of Travel and the Public Service Vehicle Regulations for buses. This will mean that you can be refused travel if you don't comply, and you could be fined.
Yeah. You see, these people are utterly insane. If you cannot see the jackboot now hovering above your head, just look up. There it is. You will not be allowed to get on a bus if you don't have a mask. Social distancing. You've got Chris Whitty, the government's chief medical officer, saying, as we won't have a vaccine probably until next year, we're going to have to learn to live with the virus, and our lives are going to have to change accordingly. We are being conditioned. This is enslavement with largely the total cooperation largely of every man and woman in the country. We have arrived now, I've said this before, at where we always feared we were travelling. Think we're going down this road. We're at the end of it. It is 9 minutes past the hour. It is at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Paul Paranoid was listening to my conversation with Gerald. How you doing, Paul? He says, Richie, I'm really uncomfortable with the dismissal of white privilege as a concept. The point is that avenues to the kinds of successes you have both enjoyed are far more difficult for people from ethnic minorities to access, beginning with education and environment, says Paul. Thanks, Paul. I won't editorialise my friend because I've had my say. So thank you for your comment. I really appreciate that. Do you agree with Paul? Am I wrong to dismiss white privilege as Kevin Myers? Have we had an avenue to whatever success we may have had? I don't feel very successful, to be honest, but Paul, I hear you. Was my avenue easier than the avenues explored or travelled by people from ethnic minorities? Do you agree with Paul? Do tweet me. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Let me know if you think he's got a point. All right. I'm not going to take a tune. I'm going to get straight into introducing my next guest. He is a bit of a genius, and you know this. He's been accurately predicting macroeconomic trends and geopolitical events for decades now. I love the man. He's a gentleman. Not only is he a brilliant journalist, a brilliant writer, and a brilliant trends researcher, but he's a humanitarian. And I love that about him. Go to trendsresearch.com, subscribe to the journal, which is published weekly. They give it to me, which is very kind of them, and it has been hugely beneficial to me in producing my radio shows for the last 5-6 years. I'm delighted to welcome back to the programme our friend Gerald Celente. Mr. Gerald Celente, welcome back. How are you?
Yeah, I'm miserable.
Yeah.
How are you?
Just the same, exactly. I'm absolutely pissed off that, would you believe, just as you join me, it has been announced in the United Kingdom that face coverings will be mandatory on all public transport from June 15th. And if you try and get on a bus, a train or a tram, Gerald, you'll be refused. I think we are now where we always feared we'd be, and I'm just as miserable as you, my friend.
Yeah, they've sucked the joy out of life. These little low-life pieces of scummy crap. politicians sucking the joy and love out of our life. They're making this crap up. There's no scientific data to support one damn thing they do. Oh, by the way, you know what the next cover of the Trends Journal is going to be?
Go on.
The baby Jesus, Buddha on the lotus blossom, and Moses coming down with 10 commandments, all with masks on their face.
Oh my God.
That's how stupid this is.
Mm.
They're making this crap up. Look who we're mirroring. The Chinese. Can't understand why the Chinese wear masks all the time. Oh, it couldn't be because 1.5 million people died last year of smoke-related diseases, pollution-related diseases because of the filthy air. The coronavirus, we said it from the beginning. It's a fraud. It was pumped up by the media. The people that are dying from it, chronically ill, elderly. In Italy, the average age of the deaths, 80 years old, 99% had pre-existing conditions. To Massachusetts, 81 years old. Obesity, type 2 diabetes. Can't understand why they're susceptible to this respiratory infection. Oh, it couldn't be because of all the extra weight you have on your body.
Yeah.
Oh, and who else is dying? Oh, people with lung disorders, smoking related. People with heart conditions, respiratory ailments. The numbers add up to nothing. Oh, Celente, 330,000 people died around the world of a population of 7.7 billion. What the hell are you telling me this crap for? Oh, and by the way, who gives a good damn of the Americans slaughtering over 1 million Iraqis? Oh, screw you, Celente. That doesn't count. We're a bunch of little gutless freaks, and we follow the orders of the slimy lowlives above us. Heil Hitler! March to Mussolini. Salute Stalin. Bow down to Conti. Hey, take that O out of it and shove a U into his name. How about the piece of shit over there in Spain? Sanchez, a little freak that all he wants is power. And now he has it. Madame Merkel, little ballless Macron, the slimy crapper we have over here in New York, Cuomo, a daddy's boy, born on third base and thought he had a home run. If Mario wasn't my daddy and wasn't the governor before me, I wouldn't be here like all you pieces of UK crap that are running your parliament. We're from the royalty. All you are pieces of crap. Don't forget it. Get in line. March and follow your orders.
Carlin said it, didn't he? About the club that we're not in.
We ain't in it.
Why did they do it?
One big club and we ain't in it. Look at the moronic people. Look at the gutless crowds. Hey, when are you going to wait for the official order from the Department of Health? The Interior Minister says you can take your masks off now. Yeah. Oh, thank you, your Lord. Oh, thank you, your Lord.
Are you... How devastating is it for you? I've not been around the independent media and seeing things, as long as you have, seeing them in a different light. How difficult is it for you to accept the acquiescence that you just described there?
I won't accept it at all. You can go on my Gerald Celente on YouTube. I call out Cuomo. Hey, boy, come over here and try to put a mask on me. Come over here and try to put a mask on me man to man. Oh, and leave your little tough boys behind.
The public...
I am a free man. I was not put on this earth to bow to the dictators. That's what they are. Dictators, you got it.
Whatever this is then, that emerged over the winter, whatever this virus is, was it something that they knew was coming, or was it something that they just have taken advantage of? Was it premeditated, or was it a case of, great, we've got this virus, now we can do the things we wanted to do? What do you think?
I think the Chinese, again, go to our website, trendsjournal.com, look at the archives.
And subscribe to the journal, people. I don't endorse very much. It's brilliant. Go ahead, Joe.
And you look at the cover for January 28th. This is when it all started to break loose. 106 dead in China. There was coronavirus, capital letters. 106 dead in China. Our next line was 1.4 billion still alive. The new Black Plague.
That's right.
What are you telling me 106 people died in a country of 1.4 billion people? Because what they did is they locked down everything, including Hong Kong. They played this out. The media picked up on it. A little slime ball, another ballless little character of nothing. Another guy who thinks who the hell he is, Jeff Zucker, CNN, the Cartoon News Network. Take that Z off and put an F in front of it.
Yeah.
Go to the magazine, our quote taken from the Wall Street Journal. Little Zucker boy told his staff when this was starting to become news to stay on it because it was building up ratings. People weren't tuning in to watch little Anderson Cooper, another daddy's boy, born on third base. Mommy was Gloria Vanderbilt. I would be a nobody if Mommy wasn't Gloria Vanderbilt. Just like Chrissy Cuomo, another arrogant boy, a daddy's boy if Daddy wasn't Mario. They did it to boost ratings. The ratings were going into the toilet where all these pieces of shit live in. That's why they did it, to boost ratings. Advertising revenue is slumped. It's gone. They're doing everything they can to make money. They're the ones that sold this. And the politics, power-hungry freaks, were the ones that seized on it to gain power.
The connections of these people, you've outlined them brilliantly over the years and how they are where they are. But they know that what they're doing is going to bring, and you've predicted this, a recession, a kind of a shitstorm down on people economically. You will know this because you're across it. But Rolls-Royce in Chillon, in Scotland, I hope I pronounced that right, announced yesterday 700 jobs gone. It mightn't sound very much. It is in Chillon in Scotland. Rolls-Royce said, right, bang, 700 jobs gone. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. These people know that this is going to happen. They know that millions of people's businesses are going to be ruined. People are going to be put out of work. And as you have said yourself many times, there won't be anything else for them to do. So why do they go along with? Leave their connections aside, which is very important. Are they compromised in some way, these people, that they do these things?
They're freaks. These are the same people, as we said. When this broke out, whether it's the UK, name the country, every one of these slimy leaders called it a war, the COVID war. Just like they marched us off to war with no exit strategy, they marched us off to the COVID war with no exit strategy. These are mentally deranged people. Can anybody get it in their head? Eisenhower, 5-star general, Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, 2-term American president. He hated war because he saw what it did. He was the professor, he was a president at Columbia University when they drafted him into the Republican Party to run for president. He said, anyone that seeks the office is either an egomaniac or crazy. All right? End of story. Look at the little piece of shit you got running your job over there.
Yeah.
Look at the clown we got over here. They're brothers. Maybe I think the mother got mixed up with somebody over there, you know? I mean, look at the freaks. Look at Merkel. Look at Macron. Look at Conte. Look at Sanchez. Look at the freaks that they are. Look at the arrogant people that they are. They could care less about anybody. They don't have to work. They steal our money in the name of taxes. They get everything they want when they want. And they bow down to him. Look what happened in the United States. The cops killed that guy. You know why? The possibility that he was dealing a fake $20 bill.
I know, yeah.
Right? Hey, where are you tough guys? How come you didn't take down Blankfein and Jamie Dimon and all of the crooks from all of the Royal Bank of Scotland?
Well said.
And Societe Generale.
Well
all
said.
those crooks that stole trillions of dollars. How come you guys aren't tough with the big guys? I'll tell you why. Because we follow orders. We like to salute. That's right. They follow the orders from the big ones and they bounce down on us. And it's not only the blacks that they're doing it to. They do it to everybody. The blacks, of course, more because they're in a more of a minority group and of a different socioeconomic strata. But they do it to everybody. The cops bust everybody's chops except the big ones that they bow down to, that they roll out the red carpet for, that they yes sir to. But with us, all we are the workers on the global plantation of Slavelandia. And they're the enforcers for the plantation owners.
And they're going to be replaced. I've spoken to police officers over the years, not always on air, but sometimes, you know yourself, you get thousands of emails a week. People will, they will email you and they will give you some information. And I've said to police officers, not only in the US but here, that Boston Dynamics have got your robot replacement, humanoid replacement, within 10 years, I believe. Now, you know far more than I do about this. You're the soothsayer, my friend. You get the predictions right. There won't be human police officers. We saw the drones flying around France telling people to get indoors. We saw dogs from Boston Dynamics, robot dogs, herding people and telling people what to do. I just wish that some of these people in law enforcement, would have a look at themselves and realise that they're on the wrong side. That what is happening to us now, it's going to be them, isn't it, Gerald? It's obvious.
Yeah. Look, here's the deal. The deal is this. The geeks was our top trends for 2019 or 2018. The geeks have inherited the earth. And everything, look, they track us. They know everything we're doing. Yes, you're right. Robotics, everything. The human spirit is gone. It's been sucked out of us. And look at the geeky freaks. They're the ones that started it in America. It was the Alphabets. It was the Microsofts. It was the Apples. It was that little boy Dorsey from Twitter.
Yeah.
Everybody stay at home, don't come to work. Everybody stay at home, don't come to work. And they shut down Silicon Valley. You know how many people died in Silicon Valley to date? I'm going to guess. Maybe about 100. They're little geeks. They're ballless little boys. Look at them. There's not a man among them. The geeks have inherited the earth. They're ruling us. I'm going to tell you, if people don't fight for freedom, we're going to die for war. History is repeating itself. Go back to the 1930s. Hey, there was a currency war with a place called Japan. Oh, they were exporting too much stuff and the yen was really cheap. We got to stop this. Oh, and then there was a trade war with a place called Japan. And then there was the Great Depression. And then there was Pearl Harbor, World War II. History's repeating itself. Trade wars, currency wars, Greatest Depression, World War III. If we don't fight for freedom, we will die for war. Look how the people march to the leaders, telling them to stay in their homes, put on a mask. Do what we tell you to do. We're going to make up social distancing laws. Hey, stupid. Who made up this 6 feet crap? Oh, no, we're over here in Europe. We have it 3.1 feet.
Yeah.
Oh, we're in Germany. We're going to make it 4.5 feet. Oh, and the wind doesn't blow, by the way. It stays right where you are. So when you're outside, 6 feet works perfectly. They're doing the same shit in the beaches. Oh, the breezes never blow on the beaches. No, no, no. They're making this crap up. They're making it up. Where are the people? Why aren't they fighting for their freedom? They are becoming the slaves of Slavelandia. The little businesses are going to go out of businesses. The Amazons, the Facebooks, the Alphabets, the Walmarts. You are nothing. And the people are following. If we don't fight for freedom, we're going to die for war. I'm asking everybody, and you know I don't ask this.
I know, mate.
I'm asking everybody to subscribe to the Trends Journal. It's the grand total of 35 cents a day. I'm fighting for freedom, and the more people we have, the more we have a chance of winning. If we don't unite for peace, joy, liberty, love, and beauty, we're going to die in war. We're already dying. They're sapping the joy out of our life. I say you can only have 50% occupancy. I say you could have 25%. I say you could have 75%. I say go screw yourself. Don't you tell me what to do. You're making this crap up. Show me the scientific evidence and I'll listen. If we don't unite now, Richie, our lives are going to be destroyed. We have to change this now, and we have to change it fast. Everybody out there, who of you that are a man or a woman wouldn't stand up to that piece of Boris crap Johnson, man to man or woman to woman, to Trump, to Cuomo, to Sanchez, to Conte? Who of you would take orders from them and have them force you to do something without their little boys behind them? Who? And if you wouldn't, then you deserve to go to the gulag.
I have it easy enough because I work from an office and a purpose-built studio at home. And I haven't really been affected by what's happened. My daily kind of business hasn't changed so much. I'd like to think that if I had a business, that I would open it up on, after hearing your inspirational words there, and they are inspirational, I'd like to think that I'd have the courage to open it up and to stick two fingers up at them and to tell them, no, I will not put arrows on the floor. No, I will not put hand sanitizing stations. I'm going to open my business. But people are petrified. They're petrified of the consequences of being named and shamed by their neighbours. You've talked about this. You know, I've never seen people so scared. And you talk about protest. People have come out to stand up to the thuggery of what happened to George Floyd. It may or may not be racism. I think it's just bloody thuggery. We've seen it so many times. I agree with you. And yet the protests seem to be infiltrated, Gerald, don't they? Or am I wrong? Go ahead.
Absolutely, they're infiltrated. But you said it. People are petrified.
Petrified.
And that's what I'm saying. They hailed Hitler. They marched to Mussolini. They saluted Stalin.
Don't.
All right?
Yeah.
They're doing the same thing now. I'm ashamed of the people. I'm ashamed. And again, I'm not saying this because our business is down and I'm asking people to subscribe. Our business is doing great. I'm asking people to join with us in the fight for freedom, in the fight for liberty, love, joy, and beauty, which these low-life pieces of shit have sucked out of our lives. No more concerts.
Yeah.
No, not allowed. Hold in law. All right. How clear can it be?
Final question for you. I want you to give us a note of optimism, because every time I've spoken
the only optimism is for people to unite.
But you've mentioned many times on the program with me over the years the Prince of Peace. So you're a man who lives his life by the principles of the teaching of Jesus Christ. If Jesus Christ exists, will he deliver us from this?
We have to deliver it. We have everything that we need. We have it all. I'm a warrior for the Prince of Peace. I'm fighting. I will not die in war. Matter of fact, I'm thinking of having on July 4th a Freedom Fest over here in Uptown Kingston. And that's what I'm fighting for. These are the 1960s. You're going to see riots and demonstrations like you've never seen before. You know what I say, Richie. When people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it.
They lose it, yeah.
And they're losing it. We have to unite. Well, Celente, you're talking about being, a warrior for the Prince of Peace, and you're yelling and angry. The Prince of Peace became violent when he picked up the whip to drive the money changers out of the temple. Hey, what did they do a couple of days later? They crucified him. So yes, I'm angry. I'm angry for the destruction of humanity. I'm angry for the loss of joy, beauty, liberty, love, and freedom. I own the most historic Four Corners in America, the only place with pre-Revolutionary War stone buildings, as you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I bought them because the seeds of democracy were sown here. You don't have to tell me about all the terrible things politicians have done in this country. I'm quite well aware of them. But there's something else. There's a thing called the Constitution and the Declaration and the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights and the Constitution make America a unique nation. Because the slimy people that have destroyed it, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that's what I fight for. The rights. And the right to me right now is the right of freedom. We better give peace a chance. Because if we don't, we're going to die in war.
Never stop producing the journal, Gerald. Folks, subscribe to the Trends Journal at trendsresearch.com. 35 cents a day is nothing. It's an outstanding publication. It really is. Thanks, mate, for coming back on today. I hope when we speak again in a few weeks' time, I hope that there will have been some positive change, and that maybe people will have had enough of staying home and not opening their businesses, and maybe we'll have seen some movement. I really hope that will have happened. Thanks for your time today, as always, and thanks to Laura at your office for her brilliant help in arranging these conversations. Thanks, Gerald.
Thank you, and thank you for all you do, Richie.
You're a gentleman. Thanks for that. Bye for now. Live from Kingston in New York, the brilliant Gerald Celente there, trendsresearch.com. Thank you, Gerald. And again, thanks to Laura for setting that up. Look, I'm not going to try and follow that. So I'm going to take my leave of you today. A big shout out to Kevin Myers for a brilliant conversation in hour one. Thanks to Kevin. What I am going to do before I go, actually, is I'm going to recommend a couple of things, because I don't recommend very much. It's not because I don't want to. I just don't have time to. It doesn't occur to me. The radio show is pretty busy. But I want to mention, you should really check out Spiro Skouras on YouTube. I've been watching Spiro's videos. I've known Spiro for a few years from his work with other organisations like NewsBud and elsewhere. He's doing quite a bit with activist posts these days. And he's also got his own YouTube channel where he's got, as far as I can tell, he's approaching 100,000 subscribers. And he's a lovely, lovely man, very intelligent. He's very mild-mannered and he's very fact-based. And he puts on, he does live streams, but he also pre-records excellent news reports about everything you can think of. And I have a lot of time for him, so check him out if you haven't before. Later on this evening, here in Manchester, in Greater Manchester. Live, Hayden Hewitt and Graham Booth will have the big show on youtube.com/trigger warning TV. That's youtube.com/trigger warning TV. That's a brilliant bit of it's an irreverent look at the big stories of the week or the day. And you know I've got a lot of time for those guys as well, so check them out. It's been a busy old week on the radio show. I will have the rapper and the entrepreneur, the very successful Zuby, will be on the Richie Allen radio show next week. I'm looking forward to speaking with him. And I've also got an African-American journalist coming on the programme called Garland Nixon, and he's really interesting as well. Lots happening next week on the programme. I want to thank Pippa King for sending me some really interesting information that I've been following up on this week. You know Pippa, biometrics in schools. Pippa King, great lady as well. And I want to give a big shout out to Jean Ann Crowley, who's put me in touch with some very interesting people in the last few years as well. So that's it for today's programme. I know I'm going out 20 minutes or so earlier, but to hell with that. Look, it's been a busy bloody week, and I'm going to sit down and have a glass of wine. Thanks to Gerald Celente. Thanks so much to the brilliant Kevin Myers. We'll speak again on Sunday at 11 o'clock UK time, where we'll have a listen to the UK mid-morning shows. We'll go through the newspapers. That's what Sunday View is. Going out today with Andy Williams. I like this, Andy Williams. And it's raining in Salford, would you believe it? Look after yourselves and one another. Bye.